Salvation, radio is clear.
I want to tell you about Texas radio and the Big B.
It was a warm summer night with our song playing on the radio.
You were kind of early at KCAL, weren't you?
Yes, I was fortunate. I mean, in some respects, you could say I was fortunate because John Leslie was doing the freeform album thing at night, I think even as early as 73. But in the daytime, we were a real mix of everything from Vicky Carr and Jerry Vale songs to a little of Neil Diamond and the Carpenters, and they'd even sneak in a Benny Goodman or a Glenn Miller. After jumping from K-Men to that, it was quite a change, but it was mornings, and it was radio, and it was FM. And FM was coming on, and I thought, well, I'll get my feet wet. I'll get on my resume that I've done mornings in San Bernardino, which even at that time was still right near or close to the top 30 markets. I don't think San Bernardino ever dropped in those days much below 32nd, biggest radio market in America. So even though we were a shadow market, and they referred to us many times as, oh yeah, a little shadow market out there for Los Angeles. We weren't that much of a farm team at first, and then all of a sudden, a lot of people, including John Leslie, ended up going to KLOS. Gary Campbell, that worked for us, was on several stations, Go Country. He worked at KLSX for a while. And Pete Harmon, that did afternoons for us, he worked at KNX during the mellow years and even came back later when they went to another KNX format. But I got my foot in the door thanks to Bob Birmingham at Valley College Radio. KCAL called over there and they said, hey, we're looking for a morning guy. Do you have anybody with experience or that you could recommend? And from what I've heard from both sides, Bob said, yeah, there's one guy that I can tell you, Ted Ziegenbusch, call him. And so when they called me, I didn't have to think about it too long because the money was going to be very good for 6 days a week as compared to music director and weekends on K-Men. Because although I filled in on every shift on K-Men, I never actually had anything beyond the weekends as my shift. So here was my chance to have my first full on air. And in reality, you can look back with the distance between then and now and say, wow, it's just amazing some of the little things that happened. Because years later, Gene Chenault at Drake Chenault in Canoga Park was looking for a program director for Kino up in Fresno to do big bands. And because I had had experience in big bands, I got the interview and I got to sit and talk to Gene Chenault for, it was at least 2 hours. We sat in his office talking about Ron Jacobs and K-Men and Boss Radio. I don't know that we ever talked that much about me getting the job, but for me, it was like paradise being able to talk to somebody that was that legendary in the business. And it was all because I knew big bands. I had played big band music on KCAL. So go figure. But eventually, I think it was 76, we started moving real close to being an album rock station. And then we took it, we did the KNX FM mellow thing for quite a few years and did extremely well. We pulled, I think it was about a 5.5 or a 5.8 share in the ratings,
wow,
which was very close to KFXM, who was usually number one in those days. And, then we moved to album rock and took the town by storm. In the very first book, KCAL FM as an album rock station just blew everybody away.
Wow.
It was huge.
Weren't you Ziggy in the morning?
Yep, that was me.
Yeah.
Ziggy in the morning.
I don't know why I remember that.
Yeah.
Wasn't your studio right downtown Redlands on State Street?
No, it was actually on Green Spot Road out in East Highlands.
Did you work out of that studio?
Yes, and it was just beyond the baseball field that I played on when I played Pony League and Colt League baseball for from like 13 to 18. So I played out there, played baseball. Little did I know, just down the street would be the radio station that I'd work at for 8 years.
I didn't know that's where the studio was.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I used to have to get up early and be to the radio station by 4:30 to turn the filaments on for KCAL AM, which was the Spanish station. I had to warm up the transmitter, and they went on the air live at 5, and I went on the air, I think at 5:30, it might have been 6 on the FM, but I was the first guy out there in the middle of nowhere, pitch black. They had one spotlight on the parking lot, and nowadays I don't know that anybody would go out there without a mask and a gun, you know.
I know. Were you there when they had the fire? And
No.
knocked them off the air?
I don't recall that. No, I know we got knocked off the air a couple of times due to the bays up in Waterman Canyon. They got covered with ice and snow, and we had to go up there and defrost the antenna. And I remember that, and I remember the only time I ever got to use officially use my first class license, they had a real technical issue with parts of the transmitter. Luckily, we had whatever needed to be replaced. And Joel Bump, who was the chief engineer, the weather was so bad and he lived so far away that he couldn't get there. So over the phone, they had me fix whatever needed to be adjusted on the transmitter. And I was, of course, shaking like a leaf thinking, what if I screw something up here? And when we got done and it worked, Joel said, there you go. You finally paid for that license that you got,
Did they teach you anything except how to pass the test?
No. At the time, I found a lot of it fascinating. And of course, those who went to Don Martin always heard about the school in Huntington Beach Ogden. Ogden was the other school where they really taught you electronics. You didn't leave there without knowing. But no, I got my license and actually used it once. So,
was the transmitter up on Strawberry Peak?
No, that was COLA. KCAL's transmitter, I believe, was always in Waterman Canyon, but at one point they made an attempt to get into a different area or improve their signal, and they were allowed to do it. And they made the adjustments, but in doing so, they didn't recognize that there was another hill to the one side that whatever adjustment they made, maybe they had to lower the antenna to increase the power, but whatever they did, they totally blacked out UC Riverside, could not get our signal on campus or anywhere near the campus.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like one of the big mistakes that happened. The whole time I was at COLA working with Al Barnett, which would have been from 1980 to 87, all they talked about was taking and moving the old transmitter site from where it was up higher. Is it Strawberry Peak?
Strawberry Peak is where K-Bon put their FM transmitter when they went on the air on FM.
Oh, okay.
So that was the only site I knew of up there.
I knew Fred Cote that owned COLA when Al was the GM. They wanted to try to move the antenna because the antenna was out by March Air Force Base originally.
By Box Springs?
Yeah, that's it. Box Springs. Yeah. Yeah, it was at Box Springs, and they wanted to move it to Strawberry Peak, which they eventually did, right? I mean, I think that happened after I left, but the finagling that went on in those days, and KCAL FM always had a problem because 96.7, there was a 96.7 in Orange County or somewhere out this way that the two of them met near the river area, Corona out that way. And it was a constant signal fight. When you were paying the kind of money you were paying for Arbitron in those days for the ratings, you wanted as much bang for your buck as you could get. So you were always trying to come up with a way to get to Montclair or get to Claremont better, because the Riverside San Bernardino book included Ontario, Montclair, and Claremont and all of that. And KCAL's signal was not as strong that direction as they had hoped for. And it was hard to compete with KLOS in those days if you didn't kind of get into that market too. So I remember a lot of that stuff going on. But when I heard the new COLA signal, when I was living in Orange County early in the 80s, or late, I guess it would have to be later in the 80s when they finally got the transmitter moved, I remember thinking, what a signal. COLA is going to show up in the LA book, which they did with a 0.3. I don't know if they ever got beyond 0.3, but
I guess you were born in San Bernardino, weren't you?
no, actually I was born in Ohio.
Oh.
We moved to San Bernardino when I was 5. And then we moved back because my parents got homesick for Ohio, and they stayed through one snow until they said, what in the world were we thinking?
Didn't your dad have a furniture store on Baseline or somewhere around there?
Yeah, he had Z&B Furniture, which was close to Tippecanoe, was Baseline in Tippecanoe, close to Jack Van Wyck Volkswagen.
I still have the VW van that my grandparents bought there in '63.
Oh, no kidding.
We just got done restoring it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's my Volkswagen. Billy has a picture of it. In fact, the license plate, if you can see it on it, is KFXM.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I really liked your story about Al Lohman sitting out in the car. I put that post about how he used to stop in at a Sandy's restaurant every Monday morning at about 4:30 or 5.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he was trying to let Roger stew or he was thinking, how much longer can I do this? Because they weren't getting along that well. You'd have had to have actually been in the room with them, and nobody was, because their board op was across the glass in another studio running the show, running the board for them. So basically it was just the two guys on the microphones in their studio. So whatever went on when the mic was off, pretty much between the two of them, but it shocked all of us. I was over on the FM on KOST when we got the news that they had decided to call it an end, and nobody could believe it. I was like, that's the end of together as a morning team, I think it was 17 and a half years that they'd worked together. So yeah, that was a tough day for everybody.
It's a tough day for listeners too.
Oh yeah. And like I told you, I think in the post, both of them were wonderful people to sit and talk to. I mean, very authentic, no air of, hey, I'm some big damn deal. They would just talk to you like another coworker. And Al specifically went to the wall for us in one of the union negotiations when they were pretty much ready to let the KOST staff sit out and just run the KOST music without any DJs. And by that point, KOST was already really making some ratings history. And Al said, hey, well, I'll go out with you. You know?
Wow.
He says, we'll support you. And I mean, if they don't get you, they don't get us. It's like, are you serious about this? And he was sitting right next to me. He was to the right of me. And I remember it going, I know what kind of money you're making here. Are you really putting that money on the line? But yeah, and I don't know if that's what did it or the attorneys in Cox Radio came to their senses, but they called off. They gave us what we wanted, called off the standoff, and pretty much that was the end of it. Pretty fast after Al said, we're going to walk out with you.
I remember he was on Tom Snyder's afternoon TV show right after Roger had left. And he said, why did he leave? He said, I don't know. He said, our job was pretty simple. We came in, told a few jokes, told a few stories, played a few records, and made $400,000 a year.
Yeah. and I think that is the amount that we heard around the building they were making.
Well, he broadcasted, so he wasn't trying to hide it.
No. And the hardest part of the job for them, in our perspective, from looking at it on our side of the glass, when they asked them to do a weekend show, and that happened after KOST, because I started at KOST in November of '82, and sometime after that, they told Lohman and Barclay they wanted a weekend show. Well, the guys didn't want to come in and do weekends. Money or not, I need my weekends. So they had to pre-record an entire weekend show, which was probably just 4 hours, 6 to 10. But in those days, it was put together. They wanted them to put it together in real time. So for 4 of the 5 days, Monday through Friday, they would go into the studio, and for an hour, song by song, bit by bit, commercial by commercial, on the big reel-to-reel, they would put together a 4-hour weekend show. And it took, so they were basically doing an extra hour every day for 4 days so they could have the weekend off. And I would walk by the times that I was there early enough, because we would have meetings at KOST 11 o'clock, noon, 1 o'clock. Those guys would still be there in the booth recording their weekend show. And we'd walk by the glass and see them. And I don't remember them ever looking that happy about putting together the weekend show. I'm sure it was always funny. But
I think they had a Sunday show on Channel 4 for a while at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, that was very short-lived or lived or whatever you want to say. But
well, I remember it was supposed to be a 90-minute show to replace Carson. And
yeah.
I watched it one night, and after about 40 minutes, they said, we're done. We don't have anything. And they walked off, and they had dead air. So apparently it was live.
Yeah, and much harder than they thought it would be.
Yeah.
Going from, no, they were an amazing team, and I remember going to see them. They came to Inland Center Mall. They were right there at the one entrance by Raj of India. Remember that store?
I haven't thought about that, and they made the whole place smell like incense.
Yeah, and you could get a Nehru jacket like one of the monkeys, you know. But yeah, that end of the mall, that particular area that they picked to do their show, and we were encouraged because we were students at Valley College doing the radio there. It's like, here's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You have to go over and watch Lohman and Barclay do their morning. I think it was probably an assignment. I remember standing in that big crowd of people watching them do their show, just like we did earlier. KFXM used to go to Sages Del Rosa and set up a little portable and do shows. I don't remember Cayman actually going out and spinning. I'm sure they did in that period, go out and spinning records. But I do remember seeing Dick Lyons and Gary Marshall and some of the different people at Sages Del Rosa doing their radio shows there. And again, as a kid who wanted to be in radio, nothing could get you more excited and more goosebumps than watching that.
What would you say your favorite years in radio were, if you had to pick a couple?
In my own career?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you could repeat a couple of years, which two would you pick?
You mean to change things or to
no, just to relive again.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when KOST was finally the #1 station in Los Angeles, nobody ever thought, when we first came on in '82, nobody took KOST seriously. And so when we finally became #1, and when the nighttime was huge with the Love Song show, that was about as fun as it gets.
You pretty well owned that time slot, didn't you?
Yeah, we didn't have the pressure of the morning show, of doing a morning show and sitting and air checking and reviewing, and because every night was different. You didn't know what phone calls you were going to get. You didn't know what letters you were going to read. You didn't know what requests you were going to play.
So you weren't formatted or scripted at all?
Just barely.
Wow.
For many, many years, we had multiple places to plug in whatever the people wanted to hear. And in those days, the library was huge when we first started. Over the years, of course, as radio in general became whittled down. Yeah, nothing was more fun than going in with high expectations, saying, hey, tonight's going to be another great night. I'm sure there's going to be some good story. And most of the time, for a lot of the 80s and 90s especially, there were some amazing stories that got on the air. There was not too much restriction on how we handled the show or what we did. Johnny K was a great program director in that he hired the talent that he thought could do the job, told you what you were supposed to do, gave you a few parameters, and turned you loose to create good radio. And yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact period. I would say something like 87, 88 to 92, 93. The shares that we had on love songs at night were bigger than the shares that Rick Dees had on Kiss FM in the morning.
Wow.
Now, that's share of the audience. Of course, there's more people listening in the morning than there are at night.
Right.
As far as bodies. But I still remember Johnny K came into the room one night when I was on the air, and he said, we just got back the latest ratings. I had to come in and tell you, you now have 1 out of every 10 people that are listening to the radio in Los Angeles at night are listening to your show.
Wow.
I said, what? Yeah, 1 out of 10. And look at this. He showed me women 1834. I had a 30 share of women 1834 in Los Angeles at 10 o'clock at night. And I said, that's unbelievable.
Did you beat the Dodgers when they were on?
You know, I don't remember, but I was neck and neck with the guy that was doing the talk show over on KBC. I can't even think of his name now, but he'd been over there for a long, long time. Ray Bream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ray Bream that had the talk show. But no, that was the height of KOST, and that was the most fun and the least work, I guess you'd say, because there wasn't a lot of show prep. I mean, how do you prep for a show where you're taking phone calls and rapidly editing a phone call? And in the early days, it was reel to reel, a razor blade. We would cut up the phone call and make it sound good in between 2 songs. We'd have like 3, 6, 9 minutes at most until the next phone call was going to air. And so we were rapidly putting together the last, oh, that's a great call. Let me edit that thing down so it sounds good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Johnny K worked at KFXM too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And who knows the exact reason that I was lucky enough to get on the staff at KOST. But I was on Magic 106, which later became Power 106. I was doing weekends over there and doing mornings in San Diego, going back and forth. And I saw in the trade papers in Radio and Records that KOST was going to go adult contemporary. I said, oh, I can do that. Johnny K. I said, the Johnny K is going to be the PD? I better give him a call. So I gave him a call, and he said, you know, I've put together most of the staff already. By the time it had hit the trades, they'd already been looking around and talking to people. But I might have one more slot. Let me get back to you. He called me back and said, I know you're doing mornings in San Diego, and, you know, I'm almost embarrassed, but how'd you like to do weekends for me? And I said, hey, that's better than nothing. Get my foot in the door. And so I did Saturdays and Sundays. I drove up after my morning show in San Diego, and I did Saturday night, stayed in a hotel, came back on and did Sunday, and then went back to San Diego to do my Monday through Friday. And Johnny was doing afternoons on KOST when it first started. And once the ratings started taking off, and once Johnny found out how much work it was doing both jobs, he decided to take himself off the air. And he wanted to promote from within, and he picked Brian Simmons, who was doing the 10 p.m. shift, and asked Brian to do afternoons. And he called me, and he said, "You need to come up and talk to me." And I said, "About what? Something I did?" "No, but can you like take the train, take a bus? I know you got a family. I know you only have one car." But I said, "I'll get up there." And what it was, he wanted to offer me 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. at night on KOST. This was before Love Songs had started.
Mm-hmm.
And so the money was really good. I made good money at KGB when I worked union in San Diego there, but it was hard for the hours and the money. It was hard to say no. And again, foot in the door. And he told me, "It's not going to be forever. I promise you, this won't be forever. I'll get you on another shift, but I'd love to get you up here." So I said yes. And in April of '83, I started doing the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. And it wasn't that much longer after that that they came up with this Love Songs idea. And Jan Marie did the first 6 to 10, I did 10 to 2. And when he called us in to a meeting to tell us that he wanted us to read love letters and take phone calls and put mushy messages on the radio, Jan and I both looked at each other and went, "Are you kidding me?" Because even though KOST was adult contemporary, it was being run the way most FMs sounded in the late 70s and early 80s. Play 3 songs, say a little bit, not too much personality, not too much of anything. Give them the music, be their companion, just be a really nice human being. And all of a sudden, we were going to have to work really hard. You've got 3 songs to come up with a great phone call, and then 3 songs and come up with a great phone call. And we thought, we don't want to do this until the first ratings book came out. The very first book, the ratings doubled from what we had at night, and the rest is history. From that point, there was no turning back. It just took off like wildfire.
How long was Johnny there?
Johnny left well before I did. He said he was retiring. I believe it was 1999 that he was retiring. He ended up going across the street to KBIG. And then KBIG and KOST joined forces and merged as AM/FM radio. And soon everybody was working. Johnny was over at KBIG, and Johnny Chang was the new program director of KOST. But it was all in the family pretty much at that point. At one point when Johnny was at K-Earth and The Wave, we discussed me coming over there, and being on The Wave initially is what he saw me as doing. And I came close to saying yes, but I'd been at KOST so long that 1982 was a long time ago. And although I know I didn't owe them any loyalty because it was a completely different company, we changed companies 3 times. We changed general managers a handful of times. But there was something that said, "Nah, you belong here. They're still doing the Love Song show. That's what you're known for. It's still an easy show for you to do. People like you. Bloom where you're planted," as Robert Schuller used to say. Go try to create something new. So I told Johnny no. He told me, "Think it over. Let me call you back in a couple of days." And I said, "Okay." He called me back in a couple of days. He said, "Now, would you like to come over and join The Wave?" And I said, "No, I think I'll just stay here if that's okay with you." And we've remained friends. I mean, we still talk. Yeah, he was the first guy that called me when I retired in January. He was the first. My phone rang as soon as the news got out, and I talked to Johnny for over an hour. he said, hey, your legacy is well taken care of. You don't have anything else to do. You don't have to feel bad about stepping aside. You've done it all. Feel good about this. And I said, hey, believe me, I do. I only hung on this long because I was thinking they're eventually going to get tired of me here.
Took 38 years.
Took a long time. Yeah. The only thing I could add is I've been a very lucky person. They say timing is everything. And there's a lot of truth to that, because as a 12-year-old kid, Bill Watson didn't have to take my phone call when I said I want to be in radio and I really like Cayman and I think you're better than KFXM. And, well, why don't you come in and watch me do my show sometime? I mean, who did that? I was at Cayman at the right time. I became the music director of the station when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
And most of the guys on the radio station were much older than me, and I was their boss, telling them what they could play and what they could do. And the things that we created at KCAL, the legendary rock station that became for decades. I got to consult COLA after leaving KCAL, and we took COLA to a point where they beat KCAL. And I mean, I got to do a syndicated show. I worked for the company. Delilah was originally on Jones Radio, and she actually started her love songs thing about the time we started our love songs thing on KOST, and we were offered an opportunity to syndicate KOST doing the love songs, and Johnny didn't want to do it. And I think those of us that worked the show always kind of regretted that we never had that opportunity. So in 2003, I made a phone call to Jones Radio, and I said, Delilah's on Monday through Friday. Wouldn't you like to have somebody on the weekends? Could I, how about I do a weekend love song show for you? And they flew me up to Seattle. The whole staff interviewed me, got back to me and said, yeah, we're going to do this. I said, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, you'll fly up to Seattle every weekend and do your show, and then you'll fly home. And I said, I will. Isn't there an easier way than that? Well, I suppose we could set it up in you got a spare bedroom? And I said, yeah. Well, we'll set up a studio and you can do it from your home. I said, is that going to work? Oh, it's amazing what we can do with technology now. And it took several months to set things up, and it didn't always work perfectly. But I got to do a syndicated show for a year. I was Delilah's weekend host on a lot of her affiliates because she didn't want to work 6-7 days a week. And so I had the chance to do that for a year. And it was a lot of people. When people say syndication is a lot of work, you have no idea. I was my own producer. I was my own editor. I was my own talent. And I had a support staff in Seattle listening to what I was sending down the line and trying to make sense of it, correct it, fix it, whatever. If we had issues, I had to get on the phone with the engineer who wasn't here. He was in Seattle. But it was fun. I mean, in hindsight, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I did it. It was one more thing I wanted to do. I got to program the Mighty 690 in San Diego. We beat KFI in the Los Angeles ratings. That was before KISS FM ever started. So KFI was the big pop music station in those days. I beat them. In the Los Angeles book, I beat them with a signal from San Diego.
Wow.
So, and we were the #1 biggest audience cume in San Diego when I ran the Mighty 690. And that was a thrill, and I got to consult that format. I got to consult album rock later. I got to consult adult contemporary for years with stations in Northern California and Hawaii and different places. So I pretty much done everything that I wanted to do. Got to do a morning show, got to do programming, and I've just been very lucky, with all the opportunities that were handed my way.
What are your plans now?
I said I want to take a little time. A couple of people contacted me about including a daily show, and I said, a daily show? Well, yeah, you could probably only have to go into the studio 1 or 2 days a week to record your show with the new technology. And I thought, I just got out of driving to Los Angeles for the last 38 years of going in 6 days a week. I don't, even 2 days a week driving to Burbank or Los Angeles doesn't sound like fun to me. But I said, okay, I'll consider it. And we've kept that line open. With what's going on with the virus right now, not too many people are making moves as far as changing programming and radio stations. And I've got people that still want to do a syndicated love song show. That world has changed so much. I mean, people are still doing it. It's still somewhat popular. It doesn't hold a candle to what the show was back before the internet and back before cell phones, when people had to call a landline and get a hold of the DJ, and he'd put you on hold. And I'm keeping my arenas open. But more than anything, I'm starting a book about my career, and I kind of want to, work on that and try to put together all the stories while they're still in my head, and try to put together a timeline of, because I didn't think it would be that fascinating. I know what I've done, and it's been fun, but several people, Nancy Plum was great encouragement. She was on KFI and 10Q and many stations. She's in Kentucky now, and she wrote a book, Not for On Air was the title of her book. And I read that. I read Richard Blade's book about his time on K-Rock, and I can't hold a candle. I mean, I don't know if I can compete with those two books. They were pretty fascinating stories, but I do have some stories to tell, and hopefully I won't get stuck too much in the past and talking too much about K-Men. But that was the start, and that was the thrill. And if not for K-Men, I'd be selling furniture today, probably. So.
Well, thanks again, Ted. We sure appreciate it. Like I said, I wasn't intending on doing the show, just doing the promos, but
Okay.
we knocked it out. Went great.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
It was